Alex Pardo, man, welcome back to the podcast. Been a long time since we last spoke.
Greg, so good to see you, man. Awesome reconnecting and just really proud of you, man. Your growth, the success with the podcast, your real estate business, everything you got going on. I'm really grateful to be back on.
Yeah, I think we connected on a text a couple months ago and we ended up doing a little podcast swap. I think the
Yeah,
last
man.
time you were on the show was like 5 years ago, and a lot has changed in real estate in both of our lives. There's a
Yes.
fun reunion. So let's get right into it. So if people are not familiar with you, you're based out of South Florida. I would say you're a recovering wholesaler turned self-storage guy, which is the real estate investing, and we'll get into that later. So just give everyone a little bit of your backstory. How did you get into real estate initially? And then what did you build before?
Yeah, man. I'll try to keep the intro part of it as brief as possible so we can get into the meat and potatoes and the content for people listening. But I got into real estate because I was working a corporate job at General Electric in their financial management program. And one of the things that I've shared with people that I think has been helpful, Greg, is a lot of people struggle to find clarity, purpose, what path or direction in life they should go in. One of the frameworks that's been really helpful for me, brother, is if you're not sure what you do want, ask yourself what you don't want. And I was in an environment in my corporate job where I was like, I could never do what my boss is doing all the way up the ladder. It wasn't for me. So I finished that program. I went backpacking around Europe for 3.5 months and moved back into my parents' house at 25 years old. You're smiling because you already know that's not a good look. That's not the way I drew it up.
I moved
So
out
I
at
had a lot.
23 and I was dying to get out of there.
Oh, dude, it was rough, man. But I had a lot of motivation to start my own thing in real estate. And I went to a seminar. I got back home. I started doing a direct mail campaign towards pre foreclosures. And just under 3 months, I closed my first real estate deal. That was beginning of 2006. But here's the irony. I got into real estate because ultimately I wanted time freedom, but cash flow, wealth building, like those are the things I was after. But I felt like I started playing the wrong game. And I started wholesaling and fix and flipping. And really, my bread and butter for 16 years was wholesaling. Because a handful of years ago, I worked with you and John, and you guys were really helping us with our sales and dial in our sales process with our team. And man, around that time, I started to really get burned out. I felt like I had created a business that felt like a prison.
Mm.
And I had created this machine, this beast that had to keep getting fed. Like my overhead was like 45 grand a month. I had to close a couple of deals a month just to break even. And I was just getting burned out. I'm like, this is not why I got into real estate. I feel like one of my big mistakes was not taking that cash I was generating from wholesaling and then putting it into cash flow producing assets. So I started to buy single family rentals in Ohio and I got up to about 4 properties. And again, when you're not sure what you do want to do, ask what you don't. And I'm like, I don't want to be a landlord. Even though I had third party management, it was a pain in the butt. And I was like, how many houses am I going to need to generate the cash flow I really want and build wealth? And for anybody listening that has a rental portfolio, you know that if you have to replace a roof, change a furnace, do something big, it wipes out a lot of your cash flow.
I've been owning rentals for a while now. You're hitting it on the head.
Yeah, it just felt like another version of a hamster wheel. Now, a much better hamster wheel because you're actually owning assets. And there's other benefits that come from owning rentals, depreciation, and all that kind of stuff. But around the time, I was leading a mastermind called Ascend, and I was coaching a gentleman in there that owned the storage facility. And here I got an inside look into the storage business. And I'm like, literally every box that I've ever wanted from an asset class and from a business, storage checks off. No tenants, no toilets, no evictions because it's lien laws,
Yeah.
cash flow, wealth building, time freedom, like literally everything. And I'm like, why have I not looked into this particular asset class? And then in 2019, I ultimately decided I'm going to start to unwind this operation. And
Okay.
then when COVID came, it was like an accelerator to the process. And one of the things that I'll be very vulnerable and transparent is that around that time, I was struggling with a little bit of like imposter syndrome, a little bit
Yeah.
of identity crisis. I hadn't yet transitioned into storage, but I started getting in my head about what are people going to think if I shut this thing down? Are they going to think it was because of COVID? Are they going to think it's because I don't know how to do deals? Here I am, I host this podcast and I've built a little bit of a name for myself in the industry. And it was all BS. And at the end of the day, I realized that what I do for a living and what business I run doesn't define who I am as a man, as a father, as a husband. It's just what I do. And my heart was not so much in real estate, but in contribution. Coaching was giving me fulfillment. So yeah, dude, I shut down everything June of 2020.
So you've been out of it for almost a half of a decade. So the wholesaling business, a little bit more straightforward to shut down. You just turn the marketing off, close the deals out through the pipeline. It's not easy, but it's a little more simple.
Right.
Now, those rentals you bought in Ohio, did you end up just getting rid of those or do you still have those?
So funny you asked me that. So I came into 2024 with 2 out of the 4 rentals. I sold one at the end of February, and I'm under contract to close next week on the last one. So aside from the home I live in and own, I am completely out of the single family residential game.
And with those rentals in Ohio, were you buying those in cash or were you getting financing for them?
Cash. Now, 2
Okay.
years ago, we
Yeah.
refied and we pulled a bunch of cash out. So I bought them cash, and then a couple years ago, I refied them. It took my cash flow from, I don't know, roughly $600 a month down to a buck 80, $200 a month.
Yeah.
And then again, every year inevitably, there would be like a big CapEx type item. And then my cash flows wiped out. And I'm like, man, this is just such a slow process.
It is tough. I own rentals, single family rentals, condos, houses, all that stuff. And I had one, I'll give you an example, and then we'll go into storage. The first one I ever bought, best deal you could ever buy from a rental standpoint, except for the fact that it was in New York. I did smoke and cash out refi. It is amazing. And then the tenants were bad the whole time, but we just wrote it out because in New York, you can't kick people out basically. So once they left 3 years later, I had to sink like $28,000 of my own cash into that property to rehab it, which pretty much gobbled that cash flow up for the next 3 or 4 years. So the point of the story is they can look really good on paper, but you can't really rely on that cash flow. It has to be more of a long-term game if you're going to get into the single family rental business or even
100%.
the apartment business. So the points you made for storage are 100% true. So the first thing I want to cover is
Yep.
you started storage from scratch, roughly. You had a name and some resources and all that, but from a storage standpoint, you had to start with no momentum for the most part. So what was your path?
Yeah, man. I want to share that first I walked the walk. And what I mean by that is I did what I recommend most people do is I hired a coach. Now, could I have figured out storage on my own? Yeah, I'm no genius, but I'm not an idiot either. But I also knew that it was going to take me a lot longer. I was going to have more of a learning curve. And so just investing in yourself, hiring a coach or mentor, I'm not going to get into that because I think everybody listening knows the importance of that. But to me, that was like a no-brainer. I said, let me get some guidance. And brother, I'm going to call myself out. I went into the business very confident, overly borderline cocky. And that's
Mhm.
not in my nature if you know me. And what I mean by that is because here I am, I had been in real estate 16, 17 years. I've done quite a few deals throughout the years. I thought that I was just going to walk into storage, own the space, start buying all these facilities. And 3 months into that journey, I had zero results. Not only zero results, but I wasn't even sniffing a storage deal. And it was through a coaching call, somebody that was able to shine the mirror back on me. And I realized that I wasn't doing the work. And so what I hope if people listening and watching this get nothing else out of this show, but they get this, there is no substitute for actually doing the work. Just because I hired a coach, just because I had some knowledge, experience, and resources, doesn't mean I'm going to the front of the line and I'm all of a sudden going to start buying all these facilities. And then I got serious with myself. I said, I got to recommit myself to this process. And once I did that, less than a month and a half later, I was under contract to purchase a 43,000 square foot facility in Mississippi. So that was my journey, man. I hired a coach, didn't do anything, goofed off for 3 months, thinking it was just going to happen, recommitted myself to it, and actually just started to do the work. And yeah, went under contract. And then later that year, September, is when I closed on that particular facility.
So you got your first pad. I'm glad you made that point because that's what a lot of people think, especially when they're rich and successful already. You get that, oh, I can do anything. I've been there in different ventures too. You got to humble yourself and do the work. That's the most important thing. And the key is what you said, the smart work. Hire a coach to teach you where to chop that tree down. So you bought your first facility. These are obviously much more expensive than the average home in America. Now, my first question is, did you go direct to seller? Did you buy it on the market? How did you
Yeah.
find it?
So I've been involved in 6 storage deals up until this point. 3 I've wholesaled, and one of those wholesaled, I retained a small equity position in the deal, which I still have. And then I currently own 3. That
Okay.
first deal was through a relationship with a wholesaler.
Really?
Yes, it was a relationship. Now, there's 3 ways that I have found these deals: relationships, cold calling, and direct mail.
Just typical seller marketing.
Here's what I want people to understand. All the skills we acquire running a single family business, I don't care if it's wholesaling, creative financing, fix and flip, whatever it is, those skills are easily transferable into storage. I'm big on building relationships with people. And because I was very clear and intentional and sharing what exactly I was looking for. Hey, I'm looking for X size facility in this type of market, this type of opportunity. I was always planting seeds with everybody I would talk to. And this particular wholesaler who I had a really good relationship with knew exactly what I was looking for. He had an opportunity come across his desk. He already owned storage, and it came from a broker that he's closed some deals with. And it was an off-market listing. And he picked up the phone, called me. He said, hey, check your email. I think I got your first deal. I looked at it. I'm like, boom, boom. This checks off every box I'm looking for. I went under contract end of April and I closed beginning of September. So it took a bit. I got SBA financing and went through a million hoops to close that first deal, but super grateful for it because of the learning lessons that came from that. But yeah, that first deal came from a wholesaler.
Okay. So the first deal came from a wholesaler. Now, that's key. The relationships, they serve you forever, right? So that's amazing. You got SBA financing, which is small business financing. Did you syndicate that or did you take that down as a principal?
I
Like,
took it down as a principal. So here's exactly what I did. I
yeah.
got 85% SBA financing. And so I bought that facility for 1.592 million. I didn't
Okay.
have 1.592 million. I didn't have 400 grand to put down in this deal. So I needed 15%, what they call an equity injection. Basically like the money I need to get into the deal. I brought in, again, through a relationship, I brought in a buddy of mine who had capital, was looking to put it to work, but doesn't know the first thing about storage. But because of
Mhm.
our relationship, he trusts me. He injected about 360 grand into the deal. So I was able to get into that deal with none of my own money, 85% SBA financing and
That's
then a
amazing.
15% equity partner, and he got a piece of the deal. The great thing about SBA is that you can, generally speaking, get a lower interest rate and you get
Yeah.
good terms, but you got to jump through a gazillion hoops.
So you buy this property, 1.592 million. Now, that's the buy price. What type of cap rate does something like this make? I'm assuming it's probably higher if it's in a lower income area.
We bought this right at around an 8 cap. And by the way, a cap rate is nothing more than an expression of value, right? So in commercial real estate, the value is not based on comps. The value is based on the NOI, the net operating income, which
Yeah.
is nothing more than to say it's the income the asset produces. We bought that facility and I've learned so much from owning and operating because we bought in a tough market, if I'm being honest.
Good.
I violated the first rule of real estate, which anybody that is not even in real estate knows its location. But we bought it right. We bought it at the right price. And so we were able to cash flow. Today, we're under contract for 2.495 to sell it. Yeah, we just got past due diligence with the buyer. And yeah, we'll do well with it. But now the plan is to take that capital and redeploy it into a different market. Yeah, man, cap rates. I think there's a lot of conversation about cap rates these days. I don't put all my eggs in that basket when I'm buying. I think the cap rate's much more important when you're selling, right? The lower the cap rate, the higher the value you're getting, and the reverse is true. So when we bought that particular facility, we knew that it was a value add play. We were going to raise the rates, increase the value of the facility, and then turn around in 2 to 3 years, sell it, take that capital.
So you bought it at an 8 cap. So at the time, did you buy it at an arbitrage of that cap rate or you paid the true cap rate, but you knew you could raise the income?
We bought it at a discount and we knew that there was a
Yeah.
pretty big gap between
Yeah.
what the current rates were, what we could get the rates, and then what that would translate to the NOI, the bottom line.
That's the thing I love about commercial is like you don't need to necessarily steal these properties
Right.
because you buy with the cap rate arbitrage. That's like basically free money. But then if the NOI is currently, let's call it 60 grand a year, but could be 80 with some levers you could pull over 2 or 3 years, that multiple is where you can
Right.
these giant exits and build a storage empire, pun intended.
And that's the key right there. What you just said is so key, Greg, because people might hear that and say, oh, you only raised it 20 grand a year. But when you apply a cap rate of 7 or 8,
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
the value does from a facility generating 60 grand NOI versus 80 is big.
Example would be like, for the new people, if the market cap rate on something like that is 6% and Alex buys it at 8%, he already bought it at a 2% cap rate discount off the
Yep.
bat. Plus,
Right.
he knows the NOI. So the point is you can make some big margins, whether you're going to refi these things or sell them and just keep these things running. So let's talk about some of the storage deals that you wholesale. Everyone loves wholesaling. You could wholesale anything nowadays, right? With a storage facility, because there's more zeros attached to these deals, what is a typical wholesaling fee for
Yep.
a storage facility? And what makes you want to wholesale something versus keep it?
Let me answer the second part of that question first, and then I'll circle back to what the typical or average is based on my experience. Okay. So, why did I choose to wholesale when I ran a wholesaling business for 16
Yeah.
years and was eager and anxious to run away from it?
Yeah.
I did it because those particular deals, there's one of two reasons, at least for me, that I decided. The first reason is this particular facility doesn't quite fit my buy box.
Got
Maybe
it.
I don't like the market. Maybe it's too small. Maybe it's a heavy lift, right? Like occupancy could be really low and now it's a 12 to 18 month play. And so that's the first reason. The second reason is like the last deal I wholesaled in September, I did it because I was in a busy season of life. I was traveling, I was hosting masterminds, I was in the process of doing a lot of different things with my storage business. And I'm like, dude, now's not the time to onboard a new facility and go through that whole process. So here's the cool thing. The very first deal I wholesaled, a friend of mine brought me into the deal and we ended up wholesaling that. We made 99,000 bucks between three people. So I made 33 and we kept 15% equity in that deal. To this day, I still own 1/3 of that 15%, call it 5% equity in that deal. And
Yeah,
he's under contract to sell it. And that payout for my portion should be somewhere between 30 and 50 grand.
the no-brainer.
That's the first one. The second one that I wholesaled was in September. Crazy story. I think you'll appreciate this because I'm sure you've experienced this. In June of last year, I was getting ready to travel to Italy. A couple of days before I went to Italy, I got a call from a lady who owned about a 21,000 square foot facility in a small little town in Louisiana. And she said, "Hey, Alex, I'm calling you because you sent me a letter 2 years ago. This was the first or second direct mail campaign I ever did in storage. She goes, you sent me a letter 2 years ago. I've been holding on to it because I knew I was going to sell the facility and now the time is right. Are you still interested?" Fast forward, I went to Italy. She was traveling. We reconnected back in August. I ended up getting that facility under contract for 400,000, which was just a crazy price to go under contract.
That seems like a
And
steal.
it was a crazy good deal. The same guy that I was coaching, I wholesaled it to him for 550. So I made 150 grand. The deal got done very quickly. Now, the seller's attorney did not allow us to assign the contract. So we created an LLC and then I just sold my interest in the
Yeah,
LLC the
great.
day of closing. So again, basically 100 grand on the first one, 150. And currently today I'm under contract and we're wholesaling one to a buddy of ours. We're going to make 50 on it.
These aren't 10, 15K assignment fees.
I haven't heard anything less than 30 grand in storage.
Makes sense because if you're buying something for at least 400,000, there's people who do single family wholesales for 100 grand, depending on the
Yeah.
market. It seems to me like this storage business, you have the ability to wholesale these things for great margins, or when you do actually take a project full cycle, you have the two main exits, which would be a refi or the sale, which you could 1031 storage deals, right? Is that
Absolutely. 100%.
so? Look at
Yep.
that. You can essentially start with a small deal and then in 20 years,
But not to like get into the weeds, but that first facility, we did a cost segregation study, which is nothing more than just think about accelerating the depreciation
yeah,
on a commercial asset. And between myself and my partner, we wiped out a good amount of taxes in 2022. Now, granted, in all fairness, we're going to have to recapture that, right, once we sell. But still, aside from the cash flow, tax benefits, depreciation, all these different strategies like commercial and particularly storage just opens up a lot more doors and
yeah.
opportunities because the pie is a lot bigger.
Way bigger. So let me ask you this now. This is more of a legal question, but if you're doing a 1031 exchange on a storage deal, which, like I said, you have to have that property located to do that, can you defer that recapture or are you going to have the recapture no matter what, whether you 1031 or sell it for cash?
The disclaimer, I'm no
Yeah,
attorney.
this is not
Things
legal
like
advice. Yeah,
consult with the pros,
yeah.
obviously. But no, my understanding is if you sell, you're going to have to recapture, but you can always cost seg on another facility if you own one.
Yeah, you just keep doing it.
Now, look, at the end of the day, I'm selling two facilities now. I'm going to pay the piper. I'm going to pay the taxes because, sure, could I 1031 and kick the can down the road? But what if the tax rate's higher in the future, which it probably will be? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's pros and cons. I guess it just depends on your situation and where you're at.
You're also paying cap gains tax versus ordinary income tax because in wholesaling and flipping, you're an active trader business. You're dealing inventory. So you're getting taxed at the highest rate possible. But if you're buying investment property, you're paying lower taxes off the bat and you live in Florida.
And
So
Greg, that goes to my earlier comment about when I got into wholesaling, while it was a great business, in many ways, I felt like I was playing the wrong game. It was active earned income. I wasn't being smart about the income I was making and putting it into assets. And I was getting taxed at the highest rate. And it felt like the wrong game.
that's the thing people don't understand with the flipping game is you don't buy rentals regardless whether you want to flip or not. Or in wholesaling, I would say it's the same thing. You're literally paying the most income tax you could possibly be paying. Yeah, you can expense your company or whatever, but still, you're going to be paying taxes at the highest
right.
level. So there's so many more benefits to the commercial thing. So let me ask you this about storages. When you're trying to add value to a storage facility, like you're buying something that is essentially a problem and you're solving that problem in exchange for a profit, essentially. What are some easy things to do, low-hanging fruit, to just make these things better, besides the obvious, like painting them and whatnot?
Yeah, no, great question. So there's a couple easy levers that you can pull. So I look for mom and pop operated facilities in markets that have a population of between 1,000 and 60,000 people. These are relatively small towns. Look, I live in Miami. I've never spent 1 minute looking for storage in Miami because Big cities like Miami, New York City, Vegas, LA, those are run, owned, and dominated by the REITs, the real estate investment trusts that own the public storages of the world. I'm not playing in that sandbox. I'm
Yeah,
targeting a mom and pop operator facility that doesn't really run, treat, and operate storage like a business. And that's the key. Storage, it's not a real estate play. It's a business that has the benefits of real estate, which is one of the reasons I love it. And so I look for the arbitrage, in other words, the gap between where their current rates are and what is the average of the market rates
you
in
mean
that particular market. And one thing for people to understand about storage is that we look for storage within a 5 mile radius. I'm not looking at an entire city or county. The average or typical customer of storage is going to rent within a 5 mile radius of where they live.
sure.
So my competition is within a 5 mile radius. Now, if I'm in a rural town, like in the sticks, you can expand that out to 7 miles. So one simple lever people can pull is look for the gap, the arbitrage, the delta between the current rates and the market rates. So as an example, let's say I'm buying ABC storage facility in whatever town, and the 10 by 10 rates are $45 at this particular
A month?
facility. Dollars a month for a 10 by 10 unit, as an example. And I look at the market and I see that the average of the competitors in a 5 mile radius are at $80 for a 10 by 10. That's not uncommon, by the way. I know that I can just step in and raise the rates at or slightly below the market, and I'm already adding significant value to the facility. And imagine if they have 20 10 by 10s and you do a $30 or $40 bump on each of those units. What is the value to that facility? That's per month, annualized, and then add a cap rate to that value. So that's one example. Another example is in storage, there's a lot of hidden profit centers. I shouldn't say hidden because they're not hidden. The customer knows about them. But as an example, we collect late fees, we collect auction fees, we collect half of the tenant insurance, right? So each tenant is responsible for getting up to $2,000 worth of tenant protection insurance, which basically protects their contents up to $2,000. That's $14 a month per tenant, and we get half of that revenue. And we don't have to service the insurance. There's lock fees. There's, if you want 24/7 access to the facility, that's a fee. So there's all these fees, all that trickles down. That's extra revenue, which increases your NOI. And then we look for a lot of facilities. Here's one of the last ones. I look for facilities that don't have a website. There's no marketing systems. There's no automation. So they don't have an automated gate. Those are things we can do and add to the facility, which is going to help increase the overall value.
And that'll increase the efficiency and the overhead because do you have facilities who are like on the ground or is it all just you have to get a key and go in and there's no one there?
No. So when people, first of all, 85% of our tenants rent mobile or online, right? So
Okay.
we run an unmanned model, meaning we don't have somebody in the office. You can't walk into our facility and talk to somebody and rent a unit. You
Yeah.
either rent it online or you call the call center. Once they rent the unit, they automatically get texted a unique gate code.
Yeah.
And if they stop paying, that gate code locks them out of the facility. And we have a local part-time boots on the ground person that goes to the facility once a week, does the unit checks, overlocks on tenants that haven't paid. So yeah, man, pretty much a lot of it is automated.
This seems like a systems person's dream.
Pretty much. I'll tell you this. So I have 3 facilities. I think the total is like 838 units. That doesn't mean anything, but I share that for context. I probably spend 1 to 2 hours a week on that portfolio. Now, I don't want to make this seem like it's a get rich quick scheme or an easy button because it's not. A lot of my time, energy, and effort was on the front end, finding the opportunity, structuring it, closing it, and then getting the facility stabilized. But once you get the facility stabilized, it's pretty semi-passive.
And it's not high stakes versus like the reason I had to delay our podcast 5 minutes is I was dealing with a residential tenant problem and that's someone's home. And I feel bad for them. And I really do. And I'm trying to help them as best as I can within reason. But a storage facility, a little lower stakes when you're dealing with people.
It's different. This is the way I would summarize what you're sharing. There's very few emergencies in storage. It's a
Yeah.
very slow and boring business, which I love. Man, I remember in the wholesaling days, I'm starting to get PTSD thinking about it. Like some scumbag wholesaler goes around our back and gets the deal under contract. Now the seller doesn't want to sell to us a day before closing. We're not dealing with any of that crap anymore.
No,
You know?
that's beyond you. It's funny. I just had the cops call on me from some disgruntled buyer.
Really?
Oh, it was a whole mess. I literally wholesaled the house and the guy wouldn't follow our system, which is like sign the assignment, you get the contract, put the deposit. He didn't understand it. He went behind our back, tortuously interfered, called the cops, called me. They're investigating the case.
I mean, look, we at the end of the day, regardless of what asset class you're in,
Yeah.
oftentimes we get paid to solve problems,
You
right?
get paid to solve problems and deal with bullshit. And that is what it is. But from what it sounds like with the storage business, like I said, I'm very novice in it. It seems to me anyone can really benefit from this, but the people who are the burned out flippers, the burned out single family landlords, this business model has all the benefits with a lot more appeal. And the thing that I didn't even realize until we spoke today was the lack of urgency for problems. Like you don't need to get someone to a storage facility right away because they're homeless. It's more of a, you can do a Monday to Friday. You can have the system set up. There's no life or death stakes on the line here.
That's
Like,
exactly right. Short of a building being on fire or
of
something like
course,
that,
yeah.
like I can't think of too many situations. First of all, like I have 3 facilities. I've been to 2 of them twice and 1 of them once, and I've owned most of them for almost 3 years. I go travel there when I'm under contract for due diligence. I travel back there once I close on it to be there for 2, 3 days to make sure everything is set up. After that, I haven't been back.
Yeah, you don't need to. So as we start to wrap the show up here, so you're officially a recovered wholesaler, right?
Nobody's ever quite labeled me like that, but it's funny, dude.
I
Yeah.
might have to make that the title, recovered wholesaler to storage guy.
That's actually a pretty good hook. I have still wholesaled in storage, but I'm not running like a churn type wholesaler.
Yeah, like a boiler room. That's what I'm saying. Like the
Right.
single family dogfight is beyond you now. So
Right.
you've made that transition. You've gone from that active trader business to much more of a lifestyle cash flow. How much better is this compared to your old life in wholesaling? Answer.
Oh man, let me tell you, and I'll answer this by saying that it hasn't been all like peaches and rainbows and
Yeah.
unicorns. Like I told you, the first facility I bought is in a tough market, and I've had my challenges with security issues and break-ins and things of that nature. Even with some of those challenges, so much easier, man. Just simple, better. It's more aligned with what I'm doing, and now I get to do what really fills me up and gives me fulfillment, which is was coaching, working with people and teaching people that either want to bridge a gap and transition from single family over to storage, or people that they're fine with their houses, but they just want to add another arm or component to their business.
Yeah.
Because the same way to find single family deals, you can apply that towards storage. And it's pretty awesome.
Well, before we wrap the show up, you made a really good point that I didn't want to have people overlook is that when you have these skills you acquire from the wholesaling industry or the off market industry, they are so translatable. I would imagine there's less competition for storage than there is for my neighborhood in Seattle versus the mom and pop place in Arkansas with a storage facility that's at like 10 cap.
Well, to your point, I think the last figure I heard was there's over 70,000 mom and pop operated storage facilities in the country, but you have a fraction of people like myself going after those opportunities right now. Granted, is storage more popular today than it was 5 years ago? Sure. Even with that, there's an abundance, a plethora of opportunities out there. And here's the other thing I'll mention, Greg, and I think you'll appreciate this. The conversation with a storage owner is completely different than the conversation with a quote unquote motivated single
Oh,
family owner. Like they're not emotionally attached to the property. It's just an easier conversation.
100%, dude. And I realized that when we wholesale apartment buildings or land. The best flip I ever did, this was last year, even though I do have a high tax bill on that, unlike storage. The owner was a savvy rich guy from Washington, D.C., multimillionaire, I'd imagine. He sold me his house at literally 35 cents on the dollar in San
Wow.
Diego, out of all places. And he was the easiest seller I've ever dealt with because, number one, the property was shot. Like it was abandoned and whatnot. But he understood what was going on. He wasn't emotionally attached to it. He gave me a great price. I added a ton of value to him with this inherited situation and the legal stuff. But this is the point. The savvy sellers are the people you actually want to talk to, not these emotional pre-foreclosure, my tenant hasn't paid in 2 years. Those are the worst. That's where all the headaches come from. There's a lot of value in the storage business. And obviously, you're teaching people how to do this now because you've done it yourself. What is the best way for people to connect with you, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Thank you, man. I appreciate you allowing me to share that. Storage Wins, WINS, storagewins.com. If anybody is interested in potentially working with me, if you can just fill out that application, I'll reach out if I think it's a good fit. And if for people that are not interested in that, but they just want more content, like I recently gave a presentation and I did some case studies. I'll give you my number. If you guys shoot me a text and just let me know that you heard the podcast or you heard Greg's show, I'm happy to send you that presentation. It's not a pitch fest or anything. It's 100% content. And I think it'll add a lot of value, even if you're not interested in working with me. 305-318-6213 is my mobile number.
That's your personal cell?
That is my personal cell.
That's when you know you're the real deal.
I
Love it.
genuinely want to help people, dude. It's an awesome asset class, man. I truly believe in it. And yeah, man, I've been there hustling houses. Nothing wrong with the house business. It gave me my start. It provided for my family. I just think this is a better way.
100%, man. Listen, Alex, it's always a pleasure to have you. And you still run your podcast, right?
I do, man. The Flip Empire Show next month, it's going to be the 8-year anniversary of the Flip Empire Show.
Check out the Flip Empire show as well. I've been on that show before. I think we're going to do a recording next week. And
Dude, not just that, you're going to be episode 751. So I'm looking forward to having you on, man. I always enjoy connecting with you. I have a lot of respect and admiration for you. You poured into my team, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was running the wholesaling operation. I remember we worked something out with you, and you guys were helping us dial in our sales process, which led to more sales and revenue, and just really grateful for you, man.
I appreciate it, Alex. And I think we've actually met in person once at Collective Genius in San Diego.
Yes, that was back in the day, a good probably 4 years ago, but yeah.
Very kind. I remember that. We made it happen. I'll certainly be reaching out to you.
Yeah, man. Lunch or dinner on me, dude. So you let me know.
For sure. Alex, I appreciate you being a guest today, and I know the listeners certainly did, and we'll put your contact info in the show notes. And once again, storagewins, WINS.com if you want to check that out. And I hope everyone has a great day, and thanks for listening to another episode.